start again. It's a rich thing.
What's going on, everybody? It's the Bull Show, aka Aiden, and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a couple of players on this team that are considered very young and in need of development. Now, at the end of the day, the Chicago Bulls are not known for making really good moves in terms of the developmental side of these players. So today, I want to look at some of the younger players that we have on this team. I'm going to talk about 4 of them in this video and discuss whether or not they've done a great job in development. And by the end of the video, I guess I'll have my opinion formulated on whether or not I truly believe we need to make more strides in not only developmental coaches, because I know a lot of people just put it on Billy Donovan and the head coaching staff, when there is developmental staff behind them as well that I feel like also needs to take responsibility, but also whether or not the Bulls should give up on development in general and stuff like that. So I'll answer all those questions in this video. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to the Bulls Show. Turn notifications on and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and whether or not you believe the Bulls have done a good job in developing some of our younger players on this team. Now, the players that we are going to talk about, I think you guys can have a very strong guess about this. It's going to be Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Coby White, and Dalen Terry. These are the young players I'm going to really look at, because obviously a lot of people see those as key pieces for the Bulls, not only now but in the future. And they're also probably the guys that you could get the most examples out of in terms of good development or bad development. If you're looking at guys like Marco, well, we already know the answer to that, and that's because he hasn't played an NBA game. We know his development has been poor. If you're looking at guys like a Carlik Jones, he hasn't been on the team long enough and stuff like that. You just need, in my opinion, these are the guys that I truly want to look at, because they're all first round picks, I believe, except for Ayo, of course. But outside of that, they're probably the more mainstay players on this team you expect to see in the long term, or at least you expect them to play at this point in time. Let's get the easy one out of the way first. I think Dalen Terry's development has been very bad, in all honesty. They decided to take a smaller, I guess, more patient approach with Dalen Terry, send him out into the G League and I guess try to implement his game there. He's had a phenomenal G League experience, comes into the NBA from time to time, plays maybe garbage time minutes, or when there's injuries, he's in the rotation. And in my opinion, in those periods, he's done phenomenally well for the Chicago Bulls. As a role player, Dalen Terry's not someone I expect to start instantly. An 18th overall pick, the way that we see the Chicago Bulls team, is not a starter. He just isn't. He is a bench player though, and I think he's good enough to get minutes on this bench. But unfortunately, the coaching staff seems to not see it that way. And their reasons why are some reasons that I find inexcusable, in all honesty. Saying that he's prone to making too many mistakes, he plays too fast, and stuff like that. In my opinion, that's not an excuse, because playing him in the G League, he's still playing fast first and foremost, so there's no real development in slowing down his game and making sure he could dictate the pace better. But in the NBA, you probably could see more development in that area, but we haven't given that to him. Not to mention, we've had injury after injury to some of our players, and they all make mistakes. All of them have made mistakes. From the best players to the worst players on this team, every single one of them have made mistakes in this team. From missed free throws, to bad IQ shots, to turnovers in inbounds, you could list anybody on this team and I can show you a mistake they have made in a game. So, making too many mistakes, to me, it's not an excuse, because it's very hypocritical. It's two sides of the coin. You're looking at all these players making mistakes with this Bulls team, and the reason why we are sub 500, and you can say they're alright. It's alright, mistakes happen, it's okay. But for Dalen Terry, because he had a couple of turnovers in Summer League and he still plays very fast, well then, we don't want him to make mistakes. We believe we need to be more patient with him. I'm telling you what, again, I think there are stats behind this, but how many players before and after him have been in the NBA and played more than Dalen Terry? I can guarantee you it's a lot of them. A lot of them have played more minutes than Dalen Terry. And extremely upsetting, because he wanted to be here. He was so hyped about joining the Chicago Bulls, and he said he wanted to be a Chicago Bull. It was one of the teams he prioritized in the NBA draft. And I'm happy that he's here. But his development, unfortunately, not necessarily all his fault, is not been good. And I don't believe sending an 18th overall pick to the G League when you could have got guys like Walker Kessler into this team, that's been unbelievable for Utah. You could have had other guys in this team that would have been playing for the Chicago Bulls. You could have had them into this team and you didn't do it. So again, there's no excuse for that. And I put mainly almost all of the blame on the Chicago Bulls in that area. And Dalen Terry's not made that many mistakes since he's been a Chicago Bull and played in some of these games. So again, it's a small sample size, but his development, in my opinion, has not been good. Simple as that. Can't really say anything else outside of that. Let's move into some of the ones that could be a little bit more controversial. I want to start first and foremost with Coby White, because I think Coby White is probably one of the more positive ones you can turn to in terms of developing his own game and the Bulls developing him and the way that he likes to play. Because despite what many people believe, the Chicago Bulls want to put the ball in Coby White's hands. Remember last season, we were all saying Coby White should be a multi-guard at best. Very rarely should have the ball in his hands, but should be a shooter and stuff like that. His primary goal was to score the basketball, put the ball in the hoop. That was his number one goal for the Chicago Bulls. His development in himself, first and foremost, because in development, you have to give credit to yourself as well. And Coby White has worked very hard in the offseason. We can all see it. That's the first thing. But the Bulls as well, I believe, has done very well in his development. Now, it's not been perfect. He's still not consistent shooting-wise. And for some games, he has been fairly disappointing. In other games, he's really shined. But in the areas that we needed Coby White to develop in, he has developed in. If they want the ball in Coby White's hands to distribute the basketball, well, at the end of the day, Coby White has improved his handles and he's also playmaking at a fairly okay level. So therefore, he's developed in those areas and the Bulls persisted in developing him in those areas. Working hard on defense and the energy of the game, rebounding and stuff like that, Coby White has developed in those areas. But now, unfortunately, the not so perfect part, he's just not scoring the ball at a high level. Even in the increased minutes that he's got towards the end of the season, he's still very inconsistent scoring wise. And in my opinion, his scoring this season has been the most inconsistent out of any season with Coby White. So there's still improvement and development there. So his development has not been perfect, but he's still extremely young. He's someone that I would personally like to keep on the Chicago Bulls, and I believe he still has very high potential to be a very high volume scorer in this league. So again, I think this is one of the rare occasions we can look at a Chicago Bulls player and say the development has not been terrible. It's not been bad. But it's definitely not been perfect either. So probably more of a neutral stance with Coby White, the way that I personally see it. Let's move into Ayo Dosunmu. I've got to be honest, when it comes to Ayo, a lot of people have been saying it, and I agree with this as well. His best season was his first season with the Chicago Bulls. And again, it's not, you look at development and you say, okay, well, it's not just development that you look at. Ayo Dosunmu has played most of these games for the Chicago Bulls as the starting point guard, and he's just disappointed this season in that regard, unfortunately. It is what it is. I know it's not the most popular thing to talk about Ayo in that way, but that's just how I feel, honestly. I think he's much better. He's played much better as a bench player for the most part, and I just think that's where his position should be. In all honesty, I don't see him being a starting point guard at least next season for the Chicago Bulls. I still think he has a long way to go in terms of his development, but Ayo's strengths have always been Ayo's strengths. I think the biggest development, the biggest improvement that we've seen is that he's willing to attack the basket and he has a great layup package. That's the number one thing we've seen with Ayo Dosunmu. Defensively, arguably gotten worse this season. Playmaking wise, I'm not too sure. I think it's around about the same in all honesty. He's not necessarily that aggressive in the mid-range anymore. Three-point shooting has been pretty much very similar, inconsistent. So development for Ayo Dosunmu in his second year compared to his first year, it's been a little bit of a drop-off. But again, for a guy like Ayo, a guy like Patrick Williams as well, guys like Coby, when you look at, I guess, how new they are to the NBA, you always turn into those later seasons in their contract. Unfortunately for Ayo, since he is a second-round pick, this is his last season for the Chicago Bulls in terms of his contract. We either extend him or we let him go. And we move on from Ayo Dosunmu. And again, he's another one of those guys I would like to keep, but I'm not necessarily sure how much I'd be willing to pay Ayo Dosunmu, in all honesty. He still has the world of potential in front of him. I still believe he can be a Drew Holiday type player. Extremely valuable on the offensive and defensive end and highly underrated. That's what Drew Holiday is in the NBA. I think Ayo has the potential to be that level of player. But again, the development for the first 2 seasons, a lot of people would argue it's not been very good for Ayo Dosunmu. So therefore, it is very disappointing. And another player that you look at and say, I personally don't think the Bulls are developing these players very well. You look at guys like Ayo, you know, Kobe, he's running the offense most of the time. When I look at a guy like Ayo for the starting point guard spot, he doesn't run the offense anywhere near enough. And there are very rarely plays called for him either. So again, it's one of those situations where, I've said this before as well, if you expect these guys to be the future of the team, you have to let them run the offense. It's just as simple as that. It's the same with Patrick Williams, which we'll get to later. If you can't let these guys run the offense on occasion, then don't expect them to develop into superstars and get our system. Because even when it's their time, it will take time for them to adapt to that system. It's as simple as that. And the last player will be Patrick Williams. Now, I would go out on a limb here and say this is the best Patrick Williams season that we've seen this year, as we speak right now. I think his first season was good, but a little bit underwhelming. His second season was out for most of it. And of course, Billy Donovan has given a lot of information about Patrick Williams, I guess, in terms of the fact that it was a COVID year in his rookie season. There was no summer league. Obviously, the second season he was dealing with injuries, so he hasn't really had a full off season to really work on his game. I think this season is the season where he did get that opportunity, and he's had his best season for the Chicago Bulls. So, development-wise, it's an improvement, but look, I personally think, in terms of the qualities that he has, he could be an elite 3-and-D player. I really believe that is what he can be. I think that's kind of what he already is right now. Very good defensively, shoots over 40% from the 3-point line. He has more elements to his game in terms of he can run, he can lob, cuts the basket. The potential is still very much there with Patrick Williams to become a superstar, but it's all about, I guess, for me, Patrick Williams' development is more the mental side, personally. And I'm just being honest, I could be wrong. Some people might think I'm wrong. But it's more about putting himself in these situations more often, being more aggressive more often and stuff like that. It always has been that side of the game for Patrick Williams. And in terms of the Bulls pushing him to be that, I think some games you see it and some games you don't. So therefore, I would often call Patrick Williams' development extremely inconsistent. But again, he's not a go-to option. I think a lot of people are dying to see Patrick Williams become more of a go-to option on the Chicago Bulls team. Just whether or not we can truly find out if he's actually that type of player or not. Because on this current team, he's not. He's not a first-choice option. He's not a number 1. He's not a number 2. He's not a number 3. He's not even a number 4 on this team as we speak. You still got DeMar, Zach, and Vooch taking more shots than him and taking the shots that a lot of people feel he should get. So development-wise, I think in terms of putting him into a 3-and-D type role, his development has been very good. But if you're looking for him to become a superstar in this league, he doesn't run the offense. He's not one of those guys that, I guess, the plays go through him or the plays end up having him get a shot. Very rarely does that happen. A lot of Patrick Williams' points and buckets is by his own doing most of the time. So development-wise, I would say inconsistent as well. And that shows that most of these Bulls players have not had great development this season, and has not had great development since they've been a Chicago Bulls. And that's no secret. Look at any other player that has left the Chicago Bulls as of late, and they've all come to have better seasons. Now, I don't put that just on the Bulls. I put that on the players, their roles, obviously their winning situations. You look at the Magic, not the best winning situation at the moment, and Wendell Carter's having a great season. Lauri Markkanen was an all-star, but his team is not having a great season. So, of course, it does come down to roles as well. And Lauri Markkanen is probably the guy in Utah right now. Wendell Carter, I don't think he's the guy in Orlando, but he's one of their better players. So, again, I think it does come down to all of these environments. But if we're going to sit here and defend the Chicago Bulls development, I think most of us can understand and truly admit the Bulls have not had great work in development, which is extremely upsetting because one of the first things Billy Donovan said coming into the Chicago Bulls team was that development is going to be key. I remember him saying that. One of his first interviews, he was talking about developing these players. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, he just hasn't been able to do that. So it is, again, it is what it is. Personally, I think we need more development coaches, or we need new development coaches, and I do think we need a head coach that is willing to put more time in developing these players. I don't think the Bulls should give up on development, because at the end of the day, I always have said development is part of winning a championship. If you want to win a championship, you need a, I guess, winning structure now. You need a mix of younger players and older players. You need ready now players, but you also need players you're willing to develop as well. That's why I feel like the Warriors have been one of the most successful teams of the decade, because they put development in guys like Jordan Poole. But they have Stephen Curry, they have Klay Thompson, they have Draymond Green, they have their team ready. But they also got development players like a Jordan Poole, potentially, arguably an Andrew Wiggins, and these types of players. I could go back to the Cavs team as well. Developing Kyrie Irving when LeBron James is one of the best players in the game, and you've got Kevin Love, who is a very good player, and Kyrie was the superstar back then as well, but they put time in developing him. The Spurs with Kawhi Leonard. Spurs already had a championship team, but they got a 22-year-old Kawhi Leonard that they've put 4 years of development into before he became a superstar. There's always a combination of development and, I guess, out and out competing and getting free agents to compete for championships in my eyes. It can't just, for me personally, it can't just be one or the other. You've seen failures when people pick one direction and one direction alone. But at the end of the day, if you can't develop players properly, you need to find more developmental coaches, or you need to find more structures to fully, I guess, utilize our development, because it's been a long-going issue for the Chicago Bulls. But we shall wait and see what ends up happening next. I didn't mean to make this video 16 minutes, but I guess that's how it is. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next Chicago Bulls video. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay tuned for more. Take care, and peace.